Hey there, Super Nancy here. And as I'm recording this, it is February 27th, Pokemon Day, the celebration of Pokemon's 25th anniversary. I did a video talking about Pokemon's to be a master video, and yeah, of course, I got copyright claim for that. Like, here's the thing: I don't have monetization. I don't think I have to worry about copyright strike. Although, if I do get monetized, I fear that might become a problem someday. But you know what? Fuck it, I don't care. I'm just stating my opinions on each track of a certain album. I did a video on To Be a Master. This time I'm going to do Pokemon the first movie soundtrack. Here's the thing: some of the songs on the soundtrack are actually featured in the film. While there's like during the movie itself, the end credits, or during the short that was like before the film, which is Pikachu's Vacation. There are a couple songs that are from that short that are in the soundtrack. you know, and that actually makes up half the soundtrack. But then, like, the other half are just songs that just didn't appear in either the movie or the short. You could look at the album cover, and it straight up says music from and inspired by the motion picture. I can straight up tell you that the songs that are featured in this album have absolutely nothing to do with the film, like whatsoever. Like half the songs have no inspiration to the film whatsoever. They just put them in there. Like, look, you could just look at the names, and you're like, oh, these are well-known artists at the time of like the late '90s. Like they're well-known artists, so we're just gonna go ahead and add them to the soundtrack. So that's exactly. I'm just gonna go through every single track, and I'm gonna talk about them. Here's so here was the first track, the Pokemon theme, and unlike the version on the 2BM Master, which is the version that was played on the TV show, the one from the first movie, okay, the one that's played on like the theme song that was sung by on the TV show is Jason Page. For the Pokemon the first movie soundtrack, the one that was played for the movie, was Billy Crawford. I have never heard of this guy. Apparently, he was a teen singer in the late '90s. You'd think I've heard of him at some point, but I never heard of him before. Okay, I never heard of him. I never heard his name before. So the only song I know of him was, this version of the Pokemon theme that played for the movie. And I'm gonna say, between the version that is played for the show and the first Pokemon movie that's sung by Billy Crawford, I have to say the Billy version is actually slightly much better. Just slightly. But I guess like, hey, I have nostalgia for both versions anyway. But I'm gonna give you know, a little bit more to Billy. So here we have Don't Say You Love Me by M2M. And I have to say, I actually have heard of this group in the late '90s. The group is made up of Marion Raven and Merritt Larson, and according to Wikipedia, they were actually like young teenage, like 13, 14 years old when the movie came out. So yeah, you could argue that they were kids when, in the late '90s. It makes sense. They were promoted on kids networks like Disney and such. Uh, I have to say, I actually do remember this song being promoted when it came across with the soundtrack. Like when they were advertising the soundtrack, this was definitely one of the songs that they, you know, highlighted when it came to advertisement for a movie soundtrack. And I think I remember like when I was like nine or like I was 10 years old when the movie came out. I remember when I was 10 years old seeing the advertisement for the movie soundtrack, and they're mentioning the song called "Don't Say You Love Me." And I think I remember I had this memory at the time thinking like, is there a scene where like Brock confesses his love to a girl or something? Like, because Brock was practically a romantic on the show. Like, does this song have something to do with Brock? No, it's just the song that played it during the end credits. You know that song that played when everyone leaves the goddamn feeler? Yeah, that's when it plays. But it's like, hey, it's a song that plays during the credits and it's in the soundtrack, so it counts. Next we have is "It Was You" by Ashley Ballard with So Plush. I have never heard of Ashley Ballard or So Plush before, but I could just check the Wikipedia page on Ashley Ballard. She was just a teenager at the time. So I'm guessing the whole point of putting the song in the album was to push this teen idol, and hearing the song, listening to the lyrics. While it was not featured in the movie or the end credits or the short, just from the lyrics alone, it it actually does belong in a Pokemon album. The song is about having you have the strong bond with someone. There's this strong connection, and knowing how Pokemon just promotes this whole thing about how it's all about friendship, like this, yeah, this actually does belong in a Pokemon album. I'm actually going to admit that like half the songs on this album are just from well-known artists. Like, hey, this is a popular artist, we're just gonna throw them in there. And this is, a teen idol are trying to push. Like this song, which is about a strong bond, it actually does belong. Like half the song, as I'm going to go through the soundtrack, like half the songs just don't belong on the soundtrack. But I'm gonna straight up admit that this song "It Was You" actually does belong, even though it was never in the movie. It was not in the sound. It was not in the short, but it actually does belong on the soundtrack. So I will admit that. So here we have "We're a Miracle" by Christina Aguilera. And let's be honest, who doesn't know Christina Aguilera? Like the when this movie came out, it also came out the exact same year where her first single was released, which is "Genie in a Bottle." Something I've learned about this song is that it was it was not in the her debut album. It's not in the American version. It's actually in the debut album that she released in Japan because I think it was used in this movie's ending credits. That's all I know. And like a part of me is like thinking like even if this song was not in the ending credits, they would have put her on the movie soundtrack regardless. I mean, I already see these. Look, I'm looking at this track listing here, and like a good chunk of like half of the songs are by artists that are well known in the late '90s. So she would have been put on the soundtrack regardless. So even if her song was not in the ending credits of the film, she was gonna be put on there regardless. And that's all I have to say. Soda Pop by Britney Spears. And remember when I said that half the songs on the soundtrack would have absolutely nothing to do with the movie? They're just gonna have them in here just because they're like, oh, well-known artists at the time. Yeah, this is it. This is one of them, especially. Now, here's the thing I remember about Britney Spears is that in the late '90s, she has this, she had this pretty schoolgirl innocent look to her, especially with her first single, "Baby One More Time," where she was like in a schoolgirl outfit, but she was trying to play off as innocent. It wasn't until like after the year 2000 where she just had started having this slutty look to it, like look to her when she had released this song called "Slave to You," where she had a much sexier look to her. So she went from this like innocent look from maybe one more time to like sexual look with "Slave to You" in the early 2000s, and it's like some at some point during the mid 2000s she had like this mental breakdown where she like shaved her head, and I think there was like a picture of her breaking a car window at some point of the paparazzi, and I think that like kind of ruined her career in like at the second half of the 2000s. Now that whenever you hear about Britney Spears, she's now performing at Las Vegas because she started doing like since the mid 2000s. I mean, sorry, the mid 2010s. That's what I meant to say. So, what is my conclusion is that the whole reason why Britney Spears' Soda Pop is in the soundtrack is just because she was a rising star at the time. She's well known to kids. Like we're just gonna put her song in the soundtrack. That's all. Absolutely no other reason. Here we have "Somewhere Someday" by NSYNC. Now, I'd say it was starting to rise in popularity in the late '90s when this movie, especially when this movie came out. And they did, the band did separate after year 2000, and Justin Timberlake had his own solo career. And I'm gonna try to say this right now that "Somewhere Someday" by NSYNC is like one of those songs that just doesn't belong on this album. It's like, oh, here's a rising popular band. Let's just put one of their songs in this album. That's it. At least with "It Was You" by Ashley Ballard, I'll say like, yeah, that's a song about strong bonds. And with a series like Pokemon, yeah, it's about strong bonds. You could just put down here, but like here we go, a song by a well-known music band at the time. Let's go ahead and put in there. Let's put in the Pokemon soundtrack. We have "Get Happy" by Bewitched. I might have heard about this band at some point in the late '90s. It's one of those forgettable '90s bands. Honestly, like when it comes to '90s music, like late '90s music, like there are just some musicians that you just forget about, like Bewitched. You just look at, I'm looking at Bewitched here in the track listing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I have heard about that band, but it's like it's kind of forgettable because I can't even name a single song. Yeah, it's like I just heard "Get Happy," but can I think of any other songs they sing? No. When it like when it comes to like like late '90s bands, like they're pretty meh. That's all I have to say. And I get the feeling they're included in this soundtrack because Bewitched, I guess that's popular. Put it in there. Hey You, Free Up Your Mind by what was the name? Emma Benton? Oh, Emma Bunton. That was like I was off by the tab there. Who's Emma Bunton? Well, apparently she's Baby Spice of the Spice Girls. Now, the song, I'm guessing, was in the ending credits of the movie. Um, But even if it wasn't, I'm pretty certain they would have included Spice Girls on the album. So it's pretty much straight that. And I was listening to the song, it's like, not that special. Fly With Me by 98 Degrees. I do remember hearing about this band, this group, in the late 90s. I only know one member, Nicholas Shea, who was married to Jessica Simpson for a few years in the early 2000s, and that's all I know. And the song, yeah, they just threw it in there because it was 90. This song was just added into the soundtrack because it's 98 Degrees, a known band in the 90s, and yeah, it's an okay song. That's all I have to say. We have Lullaby by Manda, I guess it's pronounced. Although now goes by the stage name Willa Ford, because according to Wikipedia, it went from Manda to Willa Ford because she doesn't want to be confused with Mandy Moore. She doesn't want to be confused with Mandy Moore, who was also a singer in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, the soundtrack on it does say with songs from the movie as well as inspired by the movie, like songs from and inspired by the movie. Well, according to Ballpedia, this song is inspired by Jigglypuff. So I guess that counts, I guess. Because I never heard of the singer before, Manda. I never heard of her before. But I guess she has a career. So I guess that's all I have to say. Alright, so we have Vacation by Vitamin C. Now, this is a song that was featured in the Pikachu short, Pikachu's Vacation, before the movie. And Vitamin C, she was well known in the late 90s. She had this hit song called Smile, which was used in a Hershey's commercial. I do remember that. But it was also a single. And she also had Graduation Friends Forever, which anyone who remembers the song in the late 90s, and they would play as their graduation song throughout the 2000s. I don't know if high schoolers would still use the song Graduation Friends Forever as a graduation song. All I know is like it was mostly like a 2000s thing because like those who graduated in 2000s would remember the song Graduation when it was single in 90, like late like 99. Now here's the thing. I'm like looking at now. Here's the thing. I thought Vitamin C was like in her late teens, maybe early 20s in 1999. No, she was like 10 years older than that. She was like almost 30 in 99. She was in her late 20s, and she's like almost 50 now. It's actually kind of surprised me that someone who was like almost 30 was pretty much pretty popular with the youth in 1999. I'm like, okay, someone like Vitamin C, like who was well known in 99. I'm surprised she didn't have a career after that, like a career after throughout the 2000s. She did have an album released in 2001, but I don't think I remember hearing her much of her post 2000. I guess it was like doing. She's like, oh, she's that artist that was like lost in the 90s. It was like it's like here's the thing. You have a short Pikachu's Vacation. You have her saying a song on vacations like you have to have vitamin C in a '90s album. I feel like that's how it should be. Like one '90s album, get vitamin C. I feel like there should be like a health joke in there. It's like, oh, how's this '90s album? Oh, it's bland. It needs a little vitamin C. Making my way any way that I can by Billy, also known by her stage name Billy Piper. Uh, yeah, let's see. I'm starting to see that a majority of the artists in the soundtrack are teens or close to teens age. And it's like, hey, this is the soundtrack mostly for children. We're gonna have musicians that are youth, that are young. So, well, of course, we're gonna have these teen idols on here. And this was a teen singer, in the late '90s. But I never heard of her. I never heard of Billy. But I'm looking at her Wikipedia page. Apparently, she has been in some acting, including playing the role of Rose Tyler on Doctor Who when David Tennant was the Doctor. So, for those who like Rose from Doctor Who, this is who she is, like right here. She just has the song on Pokemon soundtrack. And I heard it, I'm like, it's okay. And yeah, not usually the stuff I'm into. Fly With Me by 98 Degrees. I do remember hearing about this band, this group, in the late '90s. I only know one member, Nicholas Shea, who was married to Jessica Simpson for a few years in the early 2000s, and that's all I know. And the song, yeah, they just threw it in there because it was 90. This song was just added into the soundtrack because it's 98 Degrees, a known band in the '90s, and yeah, it's an okay song. That's all I have to say. I have some fun with the funk by Aaron Carter. Uh, from what I know, it's like Aaron Carter is like a couple years older than I am. Uh, when he was doing music in the late '90s, he was like 11, 12 years old. The only single I know from him was Aaron's Party, Come Get It. It's like this kids party song in the late '90s that was definitely promoted, like I think on Disney or Nickelodeon at the time. The thing about Aaron Carter was like he is the younger brother of Nick Carter of the Backstreet Boys. And while the Backstreet Boys, did some music in the early 2000s and they separated but then got back together years later, Aaron Carter, it's like, I don't think he's done much music since then. I feel like I mean, I could just check his Wikipedia and it's like, oh yeah, he did some music, but I was like, the other thing I know him was Aaron's Party in the late '90s, and that was it. And I'm just like listening to the song. He definitely sounds like the youngest person on the soundtrack. Like everyone else on the soundtrack is like at least a teenage age. Like Aaron Carter on the soundtrack, he's like literally the same age. It's like what the actual Pokemon audience is. So I'll say that, that's for sure. We're almost to the end of the soundtrack. We have If Only Tears Could Bring You Back by Midnight Suns. This is a song that was in the end credits, and I'd never heard of Midnight Suns before. And now I tried clicking on the name, but to I was hoping, I was clicking on the link of the name from Wikipedia, hoping it'll take me to Wikipedia, to tell me who the Midnight Suns are. Apparently I got freaking nothing. I don't know what kind of band is Midnight Suns. Although I have to say, when I was listening to the song, I was growing tired of it. But then again, I was like listening to this freaking soundtrack for a freaking long time. I think I'm just starting to grow tired of listening to the soundtrack. Luckily, we have one more. And here we are, the final song in the Pokemon first movie soundtrack, Brother My Brother by Blessed Union of Souls. And now, this song played during the scene where the Pokemon are fighting their clones and Mewtwo is fighting Mew. In the Japanese version, they had an instrumental song that was like more calming or something, but it has some drama. They wanted you to see the drama in the scene rather than just distracted with this pop song. And I'd say just yesterday, I was watching the CGI, it's like the CGI remake of the first Pokemon movie yesterday, and it was really awkward watching the scene again without the song "Brother My Brother." I don't know. I guess watching the English dub of the first Pokemon movie with the song, it kind of does change things a bit. You know, yeah, and you listen to the song, it's like, just being so tired of pointless fighting, you just want to have peace. And I just realized how much of an important song it is nowadays, isn't it? Huh? So there we go. There we have it. I gave my opinion of every single song in the first Pokemon movie soundtrack. If there's anyone watching like the video, please subscribe and have a nice day. Bye.